Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of our Thrive in China Roundtable. It is Wednesday again, and we are back on with today's topic, which is how to launch a business in China. Again, just very briefly, for those of you that are newbies to this roundtable, it would help us a lot to understand your background in the Chinese market. So we are going to have Joe reach out to all of you that are within the community to understand what is the majority of you that are in here. Are you newbies to China? Are you startups in China? Or are you experienced China hands? This will give us a lot of insight into everybody's background, and it will also help us to tailor make the topics we're doing for 2024. Can you believe it? 2024 is just around the corner, and that's our objective. So do wait for an email from Joe, just that we have a survey done to understand our community and a little bit about the background of everybody. For those, again, who don't know me, my name is Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I'm a leading expert on inbound investment into China. I have over 20 years of experience in the corporate services, corporate compliance, corporate governance realm within China. However, we do have our head office based in Hong Kong. We have my brother, who is our managing director, and our group director, who's based there. And I am actually responsible for the China side of the business, where we are based out of Shanghai. I've helped over 750 companies with their market entry into China. Everything from pre-investment advisory to the actual implementation of their strategies, and then focusing on the growth, the scaling, and I like to emphasize the improving of their foundation and their organization with China. If you have not received it yet, we are offering a free copy of our ebook, The 10 Biggest Mistakes Companies Make in China. Just email me at christina@woodburnglobal.com, and we would be happy to send you a free copy of our book. So let's get cracking. This is Roundtable 23 for 2023. We're going to be talking today about how to launch your business in China. Now, I actually did this presentation at the China-Britain Business Council Summer China Consumer Conference. And I was talking to a lot of attendees who have entities in China, are running their businesses in China, but actually found a lot of insight into my presentation, if you will, some action points that they had not even thought about doing to protect their business. So I hope that the 14 points that I'm going to go through today will not only give you a checklist of what you really need to have on hand when launching your business, but even for those of you that are already in China, that already are running businesses in China, I hope this is a checklist for you to make sure you've done all of these points, okay? And if you haven't, to act on that, think about it, analyze it, and see whether it'd be useful for your business. So we're going to go through 14 points, kind of starting really at the beginning and ending up with more operational points that you have to think about. So when launching your business in China, the first thing you need to determine is your business concept. Now, what I have understood over the last 3 years with COVID is that I have met two very different types of people. Those that dive headfirst into their China project and basically wing it, meaning they don't really have a strategy in place. They know they need to be in China. They've got a few data points that are pushing them to go to China, but they've skipped on the research. They've skipped on devising a detailed strategy plan. They are just like, let's go. Fantastic. However, you do run into issues along the way if you do that. The other, which I have to say is the majority of people I've spoken to, about 70% of people I've spoken to in the last 3 years, who are stuck in what I call an analysis paralysis stage. Now, for those of you that are watching this live, I would love to understand which are you in terms of these two characters, but it basically means they are researching way too much. They are fine-combing through all the data points. There is obviously something that is halting them from moving forward in the business in China, and they are stuck, and they basically don't start. They've got a beautiful business plan, beautiful strategy written down, but they are just not greenlighting. Now, in an ideal scenario, you need to determine your business concept. You also need to outline the other 13 points that I'm going to do today for you. But ideally, from a personality perspective, you want to be an individual, a leader, an entrepreneur who is perhaps a mixture of these two categories. Okay. This is, for me, what I find is the perfect character for going into China. One is you need to have the guts to go. You need to walk the talk, and you need to move on the project. And actually, right now in 2023, with borders being opened, I am seeing that those that were stuck in 2020, 21, 22 are actually now opening their doors and greenlighting their projects and diving straight in. And I think the opening of the borders helped with that. So you really need to have these two characteristics where you jump the gun, you go in, but on the other side, you do need to be careful. Okay, who's not going to say that you don't have to be careful in China? Of course, you need to do your research. You need to look at your data points. You need to go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. In fact, if you go through the 14 points I'm going through today, then that's the information and data you need in order to be able to move forward. Okay, you have to look at the nitty-gritty details, but at the same point, you have to have the courage to be able to dive headfirst and move along with your project. Okay, so you do need both. The second point that I want to highlight when launching your business is please do this. Research your competitors, okay, as well as your market, your industry, your sector. It pays to know what you're getting yourself into when you go to China, okay? Now, this is the difference that will mark your success in China. Competitor benchmarking, price benchmarking, just general research on your own industry, understanding who your clients are, having a client avatar to understand who is your ideal client in China. Looking at brand awareness, brand loyalty, market segmentation. I mean, there's so many different, looking at focus groups. You really need to go to the nitty-gritty details, have data at your fingertips in order to be able to be successful in China. There are too many people who don't do this step, not thoroughly enough. They might do it from a macro perspective, but they are not looking in the micro levels, in the details, in order to be able to move forward. Research is also something that needs to be consistent. You need to keep doing this. Now, I'm not in a product sector. I am in a service sector. I do a benchmarking on my competitors every 2 years. It's in the calendar. It's part of the strategy and the business plan that I do that. I've outlined and pinpointed a series of competitors, and I do my benchmarking. So it's really, really important to consistently do this to understand your market. What do your clients need? What are their desires? And what are your competitors doing? And then ultimately figuring out, innovation is huge in China, how you can differentiate yourself, how you can innovate your service or product to beat the competition out. The next, and let me just emphasize also here, because this was actually a question at the conference. A lot of smaller companies said, well, this will cost us an arm and a leg to do all of this type of research. I don't believe that. I think if you are a top organization and you are working with the likes of Euromonitor or different market research companies, yes, that might cost you an arm and a leg. But there are companies out there that are smaller, that are privately owned, that are making these research studies specific to you, and they don't cost an arm and a leg. Okay, now I don't do research studies, not my expertise, not my field, but I certainly do know a variety of different research companies in China that do everything from just focus groups to consumer analysis, to also then competitor benchmarking, etc. It's also something you can do on your own, particularly the competitor benchmarking side of stuff. Consideration number 3 is creating your business plan. I I can't emphasize this more. A business plan is fundamental. It's a dynamic document that basically creates a China roadmap for your actions. It gives you a timeline for when these actions have to occur. It keeps you accountable to make sure that you reach your goals. Now, I talk about business plans a lot for the main reason that a lot of people don't do it. They don't have proper strategies in place, particularly entrepreneurs. And the key issue that I'm finding is that people don't continue to do business plans on an on an annual basis, quarterly basis, biannual basis. They don't update it. They don't continue with it. They don't use it as a tool. And ultimately, it is a tool to be able to direct your business in the right path. Now, creating your business plan, that's a whole other webinar or roundtable discussion, but this is something that is fundamental. And what we have found more and more is that as foreign investors are looking for new investment capital to come in, or they're looking to sell their organizations at some point, you need to be able to have a document in place that highlights the direction you're going into to these investors, to these financial institutions, to the company management. So please don't underestimate your business plans. The next thing you need to do, which is consideration number 4, is choose your business structure. Now, a lot of people make the assumption that when I say business structure, I mean you need to have an entity in China. I don't. When you're choosing your business structure, you are ultimately choosing your business model, whether that means you have an entity in China or you don't. But what I want people to understand is, what are the types of business models that exist? How can you tweak them to fit your internal corporate governance, if not your goals and objectives? And when you are creating then a business model that suits you, have you understood the impact of that structure when you're talking about your assets, your daily operations, the taxes that may be imposed? And by taxes, I mean everything from import duties to VAT to profits tax to being considered a permanent establishment in China. There are so many things you have to think about with your business model in China, regardless of whether you have an entity or not in China. Obviously, the more you have an entity in China, more considerations have to be made. But nobody has to start off with an entity in China, right? You can simply transact from your home jurisdiction. It is a business model, but are you clear? And let me give you an example of this. I have quite a few UK clients who provide services to Chinese businesses. And the biggest mistake they make is that when they have this contract in place, they do not think about the tax liability in China associated with the invoice that they are generating for that Chinese company. And lo and behold, I get contacted when the service has been delivered, payment has been made, and suddenly, I don't know, about 6.87% has been deducted from the invoice, including banking charges or other miscellaneous costs, administrative costs. So I want people to understand that when you are developing your business structure, think about the contracts, think about your taxes, how are your daily operations going to affect it, and your assets as well. The next is getting your financial investment in order. And again, when I talk about financial investment, I'm not talking about specifically the registered capital that has to go in when you set up an entity. Generally speaking, when you are launching a business in China, how much capital do you need to kick this off from your home jurisdiction, right? How much capital do you have available to you to invest into the Chinese market? How is it going to be used? Where are you going to get it from? Now, a lot of people underestimate how expensive China has become. They underestimate the capital that they need to push this investment. And a lot of them don't realize that really cash is king in China. Okay, in order to get your business moving, in order to get the flow moving, you need cash readily available. Okay, so you've got to get your financial investment in order. Who is going to invest? Are there several investors? How much are they going to contribute? Is it capital they're going to contribute? Or is it knowledge that they're going to contribute? Have you created a budget for your business model? Do you know the margins that you're going to be making on your goods, on your services? Do you understand how your suppliers are going to charge you? Are you doing commission-based agreements, or are you physically selling your goods to distributors or whomever? Okay, you've got to get your financial investment in order. One of the biggest hurdles that my existing clients face in China is that they have not budgeted enough capital as their investment. They run out of capital very quickly in a time frame that they completely underestimated, and then they get stuck. Okay, so please, please, please do think about this very carefully. Again, I rant and rave about doing budgets and making sure you understand how much capital you actually need for this investment. All right, consideration number 6 is choosing a location in China. Now, again, the information on this slide is more geared towards people that are going to set up an entity in China. But even if you're not setting up an entity in China, where are you going to begin? Where can you generalize where your suppliers are based? Can you generalize where your distributors, customers are going to be based? Can you generalize where your ecosystem is based? And by ecosystem, I mean professional service companies in the form of lawyers, branding agencies, PR specialists, headhunters. I don't know if you're going to look to have somebody on the ground, distributors, sales agents, logistics providers. The list goes on in terms of your ecosystem. Where are they, right? China is enormous. You need to start somewhere, okay? You can't just go and say, I start in China. Where in China, okay? Where are you going to say your starting point is going to be? And most importantly, for those that are setting up an entity in China, this is basic fact, but those of you that are not, have you thought about what the local legal, tax, and HR issues surrounding that location? Again, for me, knowledge is power. The more you know, the more you're going to be able to have leverage over negotiations with all parties. So even if you're not setting up an entity, understand the region that you're going into. Understand the location you've decided to pick your ecosystem from. Understand what the legal, tax, and HR issues are. Now, you might say, Christina, this is ridiculous. Why should I even? I'm delegating everything to my distributor to do. I don't need to research. You don't have to. It's your prerogative. You don't have to do that research. It's my advice, though, to inform yourself of what is happening in that region, so that if your distributor suddenly increases his commission by 10% and you're wondering why, well, perhaps salaries have gone up by that amount. Okay. And I'm playing devil's advocate here. I don't think that's going to go up by 10%, but it's just to give you guys an example. Now, if you are planning on setting up an entity in China, location, location, location. It's any real estate agent's mantra, right? Location is key. Again, make sure that you are analyzing, when you're analyzing locations, the legal, tax, and HR issues. People tend to look at price. They tend to look at infrastructure. They tend to look at labor, whether they can find labor in those areas, but they don't actually look at what local legal and tax HR issues might be, okay? The next is registering your business and brand. Now, when I say how to launch your business in China, it is a journey. Nothing is going to happen overnight, but at some point, you may find that the volume and the value of your business in China is skyrocketing, and you do need to register your business and brand. Prior to any of that, and maybe I should have put it as consideration number 1, registering your brand is fundamental. Regardless of what you're doing in China, the fact that you are watching this roundtable means that you are planning to launch something in China. Brand assets need to be registered in China immediately, okay? Whether you are sourcing in China and exporting overseas, whether you are selling into China, whether you're just simply offering services, you need to register your brand assets, okay? That's number 1. Do that as soon as possible. I have had my brand back in 2006, 7, I believe. I got it squatted because I didn't make this a priority. I kept kicking it off. And if you just knew that you only had to sign 2 pieces of paper to be able to submit, I mean, why we didn't do it, I don't know. In any case, it is vital. All right, if somebody takes your brand, you have to completely really analyze what you're going to do next. Are you going to buy your brand from that person, which maybe you haven't budgeted for? Are you going to rebrand? What is your strategy going to be? And you might have to completely pivot. Registering your business, again, don't take this lightly. I want people to understand that registering a company in China, there's a lot of consideration that has to go behind it, okay? It is not like the UK or Hong Kong or Singapore where you can wind down a company in a day or liquidate it. I mean, to liquidate a Chinese company takes a minimum of 12 months. Right now I'm liquidating a company and the tax bureau is just going through the fine-tooth combs of the tax liabilities owed, and it's painful. So I say this, it doesn't bring me any business by saying this, but I do want people to really, really consider, why do you need a company in China? What are the trigger points that are making you decide that you need an entity in China? Are there alternatives to your business model where you don't need an entity in China? Really, if you want to have an entity in China, there has to be a minimum of 3 to 5 considerations that you're making that are pushing you to do it. Now, when you set up a company in China, again, please don't take the easy way out. There are 9 key considerations you have to make. Everything from shareholder to appointing people, to the location, to the company name, and to a lot of different finance aspects from bank accounts, etc. So again, it's not as, I mean, the process has simplified since 2003 when I arrived in China, but there are still these key considerations that have to be made. Don't rush the process. So as a key takeaway, please consider your brand assets, make sure they're registered. I'm not a patent or copyright expert, but that goes hand in hand. If you've got patents, if you've got copyright issues, please make sure you're doing all the right things in that regard as well. Consideration number 8 is actually physically funding your business in China. And again, people underestimate how old-fashioned this system is. All right. You need to consider what bank you want to collaborate with in China when you are establishing your business. Who do you want to work with? I certainly have my opinions on that. You also need to understand who's going to operate. So let me go step by step. So one is the bank account opening. You need to understand internally who's going to be operating that bank account, from where. There are a lot of rules and regulations you have to think about. And by rules and regulations, I just mean practical things. For example, no banking platform in China allows you to open an account through a Mac computer. You can only use Internet Explorer 7 or maybe even up to 11. I'm not sure, but these don't even exist. But I found a way through Microsoft Edge to make sure it converts back to Internet Explorer 7. You need to make sure that your firewall in your company is allowing you to gain access to the site. So a lot of little considerations you have to make. Getting capital in to China, not complicated. It's just a literal TT transfer. However, once it has arrived, you do have to understand the operational systems have to be in place with the bank in order to be able to release those funds. You do have to think about accounting and ERP systems. You need to determine your break-even point, and that leads me on then to the point of how to get your capital out of China. I think everybody's goal and objective is to be profitable in China. Some of you might say initially we keep out in our profits in China for further investment. Others might say, nope, I need to get that money out in order to be able to use it for other purposes, or just simply for my own comfort to get the money out. There are repatriation strategies that can be implemented. Dividends can be repatriated. But again, it is a bureaucratic step. All of these 5 points are bureaucratic steps. I'm not really being positive right now about all of this. But for me, this is day to day. I'm used to this. I've done it for 20 years. I've seen how the system has improved over 20 years. For a lot of people, this might be overwhelming. Okay, but these are considerations. And there are companies like myself, there are thousands of us out there who are there to support you in all of these steps. So it's also not that you have to do it alone. Okay, but these are considerations that you do have to make. Okay, and I just want to say, when people analyze that consideration, it does put them off setting up an entity in China, quite simply. Now, this is one where a lot of people at the conference in July actually said to me, I hadn't thought about that. Have you thought about business insurances? So one of the obstacles I have faced in the last 3 years is people who want to be appointed within the corporate management structure of the Chinese entity. And they are hesitant because they feel there's a certain individual risk associated with that. And in order to ease their pain, the first thing that you can apply for is a director liability insurance. Director liability insurance is there to protect these senior managers that are appointed as board members or executive director, legal rep, GM, supervisor for any actions that might have been taken without their knowledge, or they got themselves all into a sticky situation. There is this insurance there. There are also additional insurances for senior management. So if you hire somebody locally in a senior management role, have you thought about these liability insurances as well? The other one is property insurance. Again, something that people don't really think about because they might start off in a business center. So I'm not, again, an insurance broker by any means, but I have definitely gone into this. And so I know a little bit about it. Now, property insurances are really only worthwhile if you've got a certain number of staff, and usually it's about 5 and above, and that you have considerable assets. If you are going in a business center where actually the furniture is provided to you, the copy machine, all of that would be under the property insurance of the business center. But if you start having equipment within your office and then there's a fire, you just want to have this available to you. The next is a business interruption insurance, which again, a lot of people haven't thought about. It was very useful during COVID for those that had it, where they had an insurance because during the Shanghai, we call it the Shanghai lockdowns, when the Shanghai lockdowns happened, a lot of businesses were interrupted, right? Couldn't do anything. And they had this insurance readily available to them. The next one is product liability insurance, which again, a lot of people tend to forget to get, especially those who do cross-border e-commerce or whatnot. Just think about getting it, research it, talk to insurance brokers to see if it would make sense for you. The next is having the social insurance and housing fund. Again, this is something you have to think about for your employees. It's mandatory. But in addition to that, you do have additional supplemental insurances that can be provided. You also have individual healthcare insurances that can be provided as well. You also have additional accidental insurances that are available as well. So when you are talking to insurance brokers, ultimately look at the full list of insurance packages that they offer. Everything from director liability insurance to property, product, employees. Understand the full scope and see which ones might apply to you. Because again, for every business, I'm service oriented, so it's going to be different from me compared to those that might have a production facility or warehousing facility, etc. So definitely please do that research. This was the #1 area that a lot of existing companies in China don't necessarily check on or don't even know if they have these business insurances in place. So please do check that. Another thing I want to highlight, because this is a question that came up at the conference, is if your head office has built up an insurance that is global and is attached to its subsidiaries, does it then move on to China? I can't answer that. That is a question for your insurance broker or the insurance company that you are collaborating with. If you do have these global packages that should be allocated to every subsidiary, check that China is included. A lot of people forget to say to their insurance company, hey, we've got now a China subsidiary. So remind yourself to check all of this internally. Again, if anybody has questions, put them in the chat box and we'll touch on that later on. Number 10 is getting the right business tools. And I've got a fantastic story to share with you here. Long time ago, 2015, we sold our old business to one of the largest corporate service providers in the US. And initially, everything was running smoothly. Actually, the status quo was the same. Until one day, my staff in Shanghai gets a phone call from the Shanghai Customs saying, we have 15 computers 15 hard drives ready for pickup, but you need to pay and clear customs. No communication about this whatsoever. What we had discovered was that without informing the China office, informing me, the US had sent computers and hard drives with software systems on there, emailing systems and whatnot, to be utilized by the China offices. And we installed everything, we cleared customs, we did as we were told, only to find out that their computers and their hard drives were also connected to a server whereby my team could not connect to any banking platforms in China, could also not connect to any tax bureau systems, online tax bureau systems, nothing. The firewall was shutting everything down. To make everybody happy, each of my staff eventually had 2 computers, 2 hard drives. They did emails through one and the rest through the other. Not a very good system to have in place. It was what was requested. If you are going into China, you have to understand that the tools are going to be different. When you are looking also at the administrative measures that have to happen for your entity in China, understand that there are nuances and complexities where you have to adapt yourself, okay? So I tend to say localize everything to make your life easier and then implement corporate governance procedures. So definitely get a local ERP system covering accounting, inventory, CRM. If you need project management software as well, get local softwares. Think about point of sale systems as well and localize that. Think about developing an Alipay, WeChat Pay system within your organization. Think about VPNs, right? There are sites that are blocked in China. You will probably need a VPN to gain access to those. For example, if you use Gmail as your emailing platform, Google is blocked. How do your staff get access to their Gmail accounts? Through a VPN. Otherwise, look at localizing email hosting services, WeChat. I mean, the list goes on really in terms of the tools that are available in China. Again, I'm not an IT expert by any means. I'm covering what I know and what I see as problem points for my clients. Try and localize everything. More importantly, also, the reason I would say localize it is because then you have an after sales team local in China in the same time zone that can help you, okay? We had the dilemma of integrating NetSuite, which is an accounting system in China for a client that was based out of the UK, and the contact person for the platform was a UK individual who knew nothing about VAT synchronization, FAPIAO synchronization, connecting to the tax bureau, nothing. This is the problem when you sign global contracts from your head office with IT systems, and they say they can help you locally, but actually the guys sitting in the UK know nothing, right? You need to sign local contracts in order to get that local service. And to make your team happy that they can push forward, right? So definitely think about the tools that you need for your organization. Again, this was something that came up as a point in the conference because a lot of companies are centralizing things through their headquarters and not really thinking about whether it is efficient for their China operations. 4 more, guys, 4 more. The next consideration that you need to make is creating management systems, okay, or standard operating guidelines, okay? Please do not underestimate this. Operational guidelines are fundamental and are key. You need to understand who is going to be in charge of what. Now, creating a management system is critical whether you have an entity in China or not, okay? You are building up a China business. Even if that is controlled out of your HQ, you need to have operational guidelines in relation to that. Who is in charge of what? Communication is fundamental. You also need to know who is taking on what responsibilities related to the company. Who's responsible for the maintenance of the shops? Who's going to be doing contract reviews? Who's going to hold the licenses? Who's going to operate the bank account? Who's going to make a decision on providing discounts to clients? Who's going to make decisions on which logistics providers to use? Who's going to make decisions on pivoting the business? Ultimately, the phrase at the bottom I like the best. You need to have a collective vision. You need to have an ecosystem of people that are going to push this business forward. But you also need individual action. And if the individuals responsible for China don't even know what their responsibilities are, what powers of attorney do they have? What type of decision-making power they have? What limitations are going to be set by them, by board of directors or investors or whomever? This needs to be clearly laid out. Okay. So please, again, do not underestimate this. Very simple, very similar to trademark registering your brand assets and getting trademarks done and patents done. This is a bureaucratic step. I get it. It's an administrative step. You need to write standard operating procedures. And then you need the people to read it, and you need the people to understand it. And this is where you have team meetings, right? You adjust, you pivot these documents, that you fine tune them, and you review them every so often. But then people are clear and they know what they should be doing. And that way they can focus ultimately on growing and scaling the business. There is too much miscommunication. Today, I had a call with a client because suddenly we were having 3 random people popping up, giving us instructions who have never been introduced to us. We do not know what roles they have, but suddenly we're being ordered by them to take action. And I had to ask my team to stop. You don't know if they're fake people. You don't know what their real jobs are. And being that we are in a very sensitive area of finance data, company data, I needed to ask the head, you've got to introduce us to who these people are. It could very well be they're right, but I don't want to take on that liability. And that's what a lot of individuals in China will say. We don't know what liability we can and cannot take. All right, you need to put something in writing. Consideration number 12 is build your team. So I want people to understand that when they are launching their business in China, they cannot do it alone. It's impossible to do it alone. Okay, whether you are not setting up an entity in China or whether you are setting up an entity in China, you need to build your team. Now, this team is going to encompass employees, but it's also going to encompass an ecosystem of partners. Okay. Now, first point about building your own team of employees. A business is only as good as its people. Okay. Make sure you are investing in the right people. And I use the word invest because people make the assumption that employee salaries are cheap in China. They no longer are. Okay. You are paying salaries that are very similar to Western standards nowadays. So if you are going to pay those type of salaries, please make sure that the people are good. Do your background checks on them, especially if they're senior managers who are taking on a lot of responsibilities. But the key is when you're building this team is that you want people to stay for the long term. We all know that there's fluctuation in China. So getting the key people is going to be difficult, but then you have to constantly review their KPIs, review their actions, review their proactiveness with you, and understand whether their talent, their creativity, their ambition is pushing your business forward. In regards to partners, it's the same. You need help. You can't do everything yourself. So you will need distributors. You will need sales agents. You will need warehouse providers. You will need logistics providers. You may even need branding agencies to help you. Make sure you're working with the right partners. Vet them. Have backups just in case. I have one client who uses 3 different TPs. He does e-commerce business, both cross-border and domestic, and he uses 3 different TPs so that he's not putting all his eggs in one basket. He's using each TP for a specific reason and for a specific product line. But it also means that he has got 2 others as a backup in case one fails. Okay, being that e-commerce is his main business line. So make sure you've got your backups as well. Marketing your brand. I've been talking to a lot of marketing agencies in the last period. And their biggest pain point is that companies don't understand how much they should be spending. I have also noticed that a lot of marketing agencies have a minimum spend requirement from their clients now. because they just know that without that minimum spend, they won't get the right return on investment. So again, this is where we lead to point 2, research, understand brand awareness, understand brand loyalty, understand what it's going to take to build that momentum. And in terms of marketing and branding, you will probably find that you have to spend more in the beginning and over time, less. But if you, as a foreign investor and as a foreign brand, want to be taken seriously, you've got to be everywhere. You've got to be a big hitter. You can't keep a low profile. You won't go anywhere. If the objective is to not really go anywhere, but just be in the market, fine. But if your objective is to grow and scale in the market, then you got to be a big hitter. Okay, so again, that's part of your financial capabilities. How much capital do you have to invest? Understanding what that minimum spend is, looking at a variety of different marketing agencies, and also what their marketing strategy plan is, on what types of platforms, and what avenues. But do not underestimate the marketing and branding. Last one, consideration number 14. We are all here to scale. We have had 3 years where it's been a roller coaster journey of unpredictability, almost, where at one point you're scaling, at one point you're dropping, then you scale again and you drop again. I mean, it's been in and out in China. And whether you're in the service sector or product sector, it's been the same for everybody. Now borders are open. We are seeing the economy grow. We're getting more confident. We're now in September. We are seeing that, the government isn't going back on its word. Now it is time to be consistent and build momentum. Okay? Scaling your business in China is not easy. First, you got to start up, and then you got to scale. Okay? So you're starting up, and then you got to go up. Okay? You got to move. Being consistent and building momentum will be key. Now, how do you need to do that? Well, first of all, you as leaders, you as managers need to have the time available outside of your business, meaning that the daily operations need to be concrete. There are standard operating guidelines where your team knows what to do on a daily basis so that you have the ability to review your business consistently, analyze the data that you have, take action if you don't have enough data points. You've also got to remove the fear of rocking the boat. If people are not performing, if partners are not performing, then you also need to have the ability to take action immediately. Again, one of my biggest mistakes in the first 5 years of operating in China was just this fear of rocking the boat as we were scaling the business. I didn't want to have fluctuation of staff, realized that 50% of the staff were rubbish, but didn't take any action. It took me a good 5 years to take action and eliminate the majority of my team and start fresh. It was painful because at that point you have more staff that you've got to train, more staff to upload, and my time was spent purely on HR issues. So take action as soon as things pop up, okay? And you can implement strategies where you have backup plans. I keep a pile of resumes readily available to look at in case I need to let go of somebody. It's there. I accumulate them. I save them. I have 2 to 3 lawyers on my speed dial in case one is not available or one says I don't have the time or whatever the case might be. Even I have a lawyer, just to say. People need lawyers in China in case things pop up. The key is making sure you have this time available to be consistent, to review the business, to analyze the business, to think about what changes need to take place in the business to make it more efficient, to then grow and scale. Okay? But you are launching your business now with this goal in mind, with this idea of scaling it and reaching the ultimate objectives that you want to reach. So those are the 14 considerations that you have to make when you launch your business in China. You might have others. For me, this has really been the 14 key ones that you have to think about. Now, I have here 5 points that I'm highlighting for those of you that are leaders and are being put in charge of launching your business in China. these are ingredients that I think that every individual needs as a foreigner when they're going into China. One is vision, positive vision, a vision that you are going to succeed in China. Then you need the passion. If you don't like China, don't get involved in the China business. I know too many people who just simply don't like China. They don't like the people, they don't like the food. They should not be in charge of the China project, if that's the case. You need to be passionate about what you're building. You need to be passionate about the country. You need to be passionate about the people, about the food, about the culture in order to be able to grow. The next is you really have to walk the talk. Okay, what you are promising, you have to actually take action. I know too many people who do not take the action. Like I said, there's this analysis paralysis that is occurring. Great strategies, everything is down, ready to be implemented, but nobody's taking action to execute it. You've got to walk the talk. The next is communication, fundamental. If you look at the 14 points that I'm highlighting to you today, it involves communication with a variety of different people, with your head office, with your investors, with banks, with lawyers, with employees, with third parties. You have to be a good communicator and understand that the communication is building a bridge between two cultures, if you will, headquartered in China, and making sure that you succeed. And last but not least, you need courage. Everybody needs courage to go to China, right? It is a big investment. There's a lot of pressure on everybody to achieve the goals. And there's going to be a lot to do as you are launching, as you are starting up, and then as you are scaling and growing. Okay? Of course you need the courage. You need to have that fear eliminated, that you can again move forward. I know this is a little bit psychological, but I do want people to understand. I have received a lot of hate mail over the last 3 years during COVID about China. And there are moments where I have hung up on people of how negatively they spoke about China. I don't want to work with people who are not passionate about China, who are not respectful of China. It's where I started my career. I love it. I'm passionate. I miss it. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to do business. It is exciting. It is unpredictable. And you should have that mindset of trying to achieve something that's great. So that's the end of today's presentation. And those are my thoughts on how you have to launch your business in China. Now, obviously, there are other things you have to think about. You know, you might say, well, I haven't touched on supply chain. Supply chain is about the business concept and about building that business plan and that business model. It all encompasses. I've generalized the headlines, if you will, of each of the 14 considerations. But obviously, under each of those considerations, you have to go through the nitty-gritty details and fine-tune the details. So just to finish off, top tip for today, and I hope you've understood that, knowledge is power. I can't highlight it more. Listen to war stories. Learn from people in the market. What I love about China and the foreigners that are based there is that they love to share their experiences. A saying that I've been hearing quite often recently is no point crying, may as well laugh about it. So share, listen to those stories where people are now laughing about the issues that they ran into. Learn from the market, learn from your people that are on the ground, whether that's employees or partners. Listen to advisors. If there's one thing that I regret back in 2003 was not having a mentor that I could brainstorm ideas off of, and just share thoughts and get opinions. But build your knowledge, have that leverage, whatever stage you are in, whether you are just thinking about China now to where you're actually going to launch to where you are growing and scaling. Build that knowledge level. Now, I always finish off these roundtables asking people to share what their biggest takeaways from today were. If you would be so kind, for those of you that are here live, to just share that with me. Or if you've got any questions whatsoever. So I will be touching on the questions later. I'll give you a couple of minutes now to write your questions if you have any in the chat box. Don't be shy, ask away. If you are ready to launch your business in China, but you need help validating your China roadmap, or you just simply have questions based off today's presentation that you want to bounce ideas off of, in the email that I will be sending out later today, there is a link to my diary, and I would be happy to provide you with a free 15-minute call to see if I can help you understand what your pain point is. And if I can't help you, then advise you who may help you. I don't offer every single service, but you might need help in other areas, and I'd be happy to have that discussion with you. Last but not least, join our Thrive in China WeChat group if you haven't done so already. We are becoming more and more active after the summer holidays on WeChat. It's a group of over 200 individuals that are working with China or that might be based in China. And if you've got any questions associated with doing business or what is happening in your life, you can ask it in there and get other people's advice, right? People who are actually physically in the mess like you are. You can connect with me. My ID is KNCOLUCCIA. Just type in Thrive in China WeChat, and I will add you into the group chat. All right. Next week's roundtable, we are looking at why is a Chinese accountant vital for your China business? Again, this is about building your team in China. People underestimate having a right-hand person who knows numbers in China. So we're going to be talking about that next week and how important it is for you. And actually, I'm even giving you a job responsibility list of what they should be doing for you on a day-to-day basis in the different phases of your growth. So stay tuned for that. If you are subscribed, just show up Wednesday, 1 p.m. Central European time, 7 p.m. China time. So I want to thank you all for joining me again today. There are no questions that have popped in, so it must have been a very clear presentation. The recording of today's presentation will be uploaded to our playlist on YouTube, and a link to that will be provided. We don't hand out PowerPoint presentations, but you can always review the recording on our YouTube channel. And then we'll also provide you with a link to our diary in case you want to have a discussion or have a meeting. I wish you all a fantastic day. Take care and goodbye.